Hello, welcome to the Geo and Joey show. Joey, how you doing? Looking all spiffy.
Better than I deserve.
Amen, brother. So let the audience know what we're going to discuss because there was a hot debate this past week on the topic we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so anybody who's on X, which um my condolences, I'm also on X, but a kind of civil war broke out within kind of the MAGA movement or like the broader right
Hmm.
over immigration and over H1B visas specifically. And so I thought it would be kind of interesting for us to have a conversation about it, like from a Christian perspective, but then also just from American perspective on, we want the best kind of policy for our country, but that's also just. And so figured we'd have a conversation about it.
All right, so look, you probably know more about this than I do, although I have personal experience with it. Not personally myself, but my wife has. My wife being a medical doctor, even though she is a Caucasian woman and not under the H1B visa. She's worked with a lot of doctors who have come under that program. And before I get into the details of that, I just want to set that up. But before that, for the audience who may or may not know, let's look at the broader background, right? Of the context of which the nation finds itself and what the nation was campaigning about during the election season. Set that up first before we get into, because I think that has contributed to making this a hot topic.
Yeah. Well, first off, our border is a hot mess of craziness,
Yes.
right? So obviously the debate was over legal immigration and H1Bs, but I just
Hmm.
wanted to set the stage. So the H1B program was instituted in 1990, and since 1990, 3 million immigrants have come on H1B work visas. In like the last 2 years of the Biden administration, like something paralleling that number has come in 2 years illegally across the border. So when we talk about the scale of immigration, illegal immigration far dwarfs this program. And I think we all can agree, or should be able to agree, right, that that is a massive problem. And I think it was one of the
Well,
core issues in the
clarify
election.
that because you kind of ran a couple of thoughts together. The illegal immigration is a massive problem. Is that what you meant, or you meant both?
Well, the illegal
Okay.
immigration
Yeah.
dwarfs
Hmm.
like the size and scope of like we're debating over this program, but like the number of people who have come illegally makes the number of people who have come through like this H1B process look like minuscule, right?
Okay.
And so that is the core of the problem that has everyone up at night. It's why, people are afraid about various, gang activity in Colorado and all this kind of
Hmm.
craziness.
On a side note, I just heard that over Christmas, someone in Indiana was an illegal immigrant who was high on drugs, alcohol, and other things, committed a mass murder. And you don't see it anywhere in the news. As a matter of fact, where I saw it, the person was like, "Man, I live in Indiana and I didn't hear about this." And I hate that. I hate that they try to minimize the extent of the problem because had it been a Caucasian man running over or mass murdering a bunch of, other people, right? Then it'd be all over the news, or at least I think it would. And so, okay, so now we've talked about the background. The campaign, and I think part of the heated debate over the weekend, I caught the shrapnels of the conversation. I didn't want to dive too deep into it, and yet here am I tonight. Um, the current administration ran on being tough on immigration, tough specifically on the border with Mexico, but even the border with Canada, where there seems to be a crisis of fentanyl and other things happening, also people coming in illegal, and the notion that there's going to be massive deportation. So you add that to the campaign running and getting a resounding victory. Then Elon and Vikswamy ignited that, that what's the word I'm looking for? That
Powder keg.
yeah, powder keg. There we go. So
Well, maybe
now,
we can bring
okay,
up the
what?
Vivek guy.
Okay, go ahead. Bring up the Vivek and his position in
Yeah,
light of this tension that was there already.
I don't know. Maybe we can pull up the tweet, but
Okay.
the tweet by Vivek Ramaswamy kind of is what set the whole debate off.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why a lot of people got upset by it, some of the things he said, because,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll get into this after we read the tweet, but I would just say that sometimes you can point out a legitimate problem, but offer an equally bad solution, or
Mm-hmm.
offer a solution that itself is subpar and not good.
Yeah.
Um,
Let me put it up here. There it is. Although it's going to be kind of hard to read it. I can read it. Ready? You want me to read it?
sure.
You're on mute.
I'm not muted.
I lost you, buddy.
Oh.
Let me see.
Oh.
No. Weird.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you.
Oh.
Weird. Why don't you log off and get back on?
I'm
You
back.
know what? It might be me, actually. Mercy, blaming Joey, and it's probably me.
Can you hear me now? I'll take that as a no.
Hello, hello, hello.
I can hear
But
you.
You can hear me, though, right?
Yeah.
See, I can't hear you. It's annoying.
Wonder if the audience can hear me.
Mercy.
Hey, if you can hear us, audience, say something in the chat. If you can hear me. Let me
There we go. Can you hear me?
I can still hear you. Can you hear me?
No, I can't hear you, man. This is.
Say something in the chat. Oh. So they can.
Technology never works when you want it to. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you the whole time.
Yeah, I can hear you now. I just took off the air.
Okay.
I don't know. It must have connected to something or something else. I got so many
Oh, good.
iPads in here. All right.
The sound was going through on the stream, so they could hear us there.
Okay, so let's read it, right? It says, the reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over Native American isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit, a lazy and wrong explanation. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s and likely longer. That doesn't start in college, it starts young. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or the jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers. A culture that venerates Corey from Boy Meets World or Zach and Slater over Screech and Saved by the Bell or Stefan over Steve Urkel in Family Matters will not produce the best engineers. Fact, I know multiple sets of immigrant parents in the 90s who actively limited how much their kids could watch those TV shows precisely because they promoted mediocrity and their kids went on to become wildly successful STEM graduates. More movies like Whiplash, fewer reruns of Friends, more math tutoring, fewer sleepovers, more weekend science competitions, fewer Saturday morning cartoons, More books like less more books, less TV, more creating, less chilling, more extracurricular, less hanging out at the malls. Most normal American parents look skeptical at those kinds of parents. More normal American kids view such those kind of kids with scorn. If you grow up aspiring to normalcy, normalcy is what you will achieve. Now close your eyes and visualize which families you knew in the 90s or even now who raised their kids according to one model versus the other. Be brutally honest. Normalcy doesn't cut it in hyper competitive global market for technical talent. And if we pretend like it does, we will have our blanks handed to us by China. This can be Sputnik moment. We've awakened from slumber before and we can do it again. Trump's election hopefully marks the beginning of a new golden era in America, but only if our culture fully wakes up. A culture that once again prioritizes achievement over normalcy, excellency over mediocrity, nerdiness over conformity, hard work over laziness. That's the work we have cut out for us. Rather than wallowing in victimhood and just wishing or legislating alternative hiring practices into existence, I'm confident we can do it. All right. So your thoughts there?
Yeah, so my main thing. So I think he's right that American culture has problems. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. So part
Well,
of the
let me jump in here
stereotype.
while you gather your thoughts. As I'm reading this is the first time I'm reading it. I'm thinking to myself, ready? Now this is gonna sound weird because I'm not American myself. Well, that's not true. I'm American. I was born here, but I have Hispanic background. Is had a Caucasian man said this, I don't think there would have been an issue. But the fact that it was him who said it and that he's talking about bringing engineers from India, I think that rubbed people the wrong way. I could be totally wrong. Your thoughts on that?
I think, listen, I do think with some people who responded to the thing, there
Mm-hmm.
was elements of kind of racism, or
Mm-hmm.
there was certain anti-Indian things that were
Yeah.
said. I don't necessarily think that's a majority of people
Mm-hmm.
who had issue, but I do think it was part of it. And then when people saw some of the reaction that Elon and Vivek had,
Mm-hmm.
they definitely seemed to be reacting to that more because they tended to get a little heat, particularly Elon got kind of heated and like, we don't need racists and stuff in the party. And like, that's all good. Like, that's a right reaction to have against racism. But I don't think that's the full scope
Okay.
of the people that had the issue
Mm-hmm.
because especially some of the, right, so the kind of part of this debate went into is how, in like there's a kind of a stereotype, right, and that's kind of what was being played into, right, with about immigrant parents, right, the kind of the tiger mom, or like the kid will have, we got to focus, just math and science, and do your homework, and that's all you're going to do for whatever. And people were kind of saying, it's like, that's not necessarily going to solve the problem either, right? One of the things that I saw, that I was discussing this with a friend, and one of the things he brought up is how South Korean immigrants, they're actually their young adults actually have a fairly high suicide rate because of expectations that are put on them. And I noticed all the things he was listing, and when I would say the issues with American culture and the reason why kids don't do as well, the number one thing that, and he didn't mention it, is two-parent households, right? Like, that's a major thing that would go a long way. And he also listed, right, not as much hanging out or going to the mall, but it's like, actually, anyone who knows anything about American kids today knows they actually probably do need to do more hanging out at the mall or spending time with their friends, right? Because they're always in tech of some kind, or they're very isolated. And so I just feel like, yes, there's problems with, our kids aren't doing as well in school and we need to fix our education system. That's true. I just feel like this idea that in order to fix American culture, um, we necessarily, like, I don't know. I don't know that H1B ones right? Whatever the policy should be on that, that's not going to fix the root problems of American culture. So, oh, I can't hear you. We necessarily
No, sorry, it was me. I can tell you
like.
what can fix this is a return to godliness in a practical sense. You know, there's a study that people who are listening can look up. It's called the Value Genesis Study. And the Value Genesis Study is done about our denomination and how we take a holistic approach to education. And when you take a holistic approach to education, mind, body, and soul, you produce outstanding citizens, people for the kingdom, and people who excel. Why? Because then it's no longer about us, but whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it for the glory and honor of God. Which is why, doctors from Loma Linda are one of the highest paid doctors, which is why our students, regardless, we don't cherry pick for the best students, which is why our students are score higher in standardized tests than any other group of people, and why we have the largest Protestant educational system. And because you're right, when you go to the South Korean people who is just, you got to study hard, you can't be a child, they commit suicide. But then you go the opposite. Oh, they're kids, let them do, and no duty and no responsibility. I think when you have a holistic approach, you get the best of both worlds. And anybody can look this up, Value Genesis Study. The longer kids are in our Adventist schools, the longer they do, the better they do, both socially, economically, and obviously spiritually, which is the number one feature. So I think what you're saying, I think Vivek's solutions are for a previous generation. You're right. The generation today needs to get out more, needs to socialize, need to be more in group community. And obviously homeschool your kids or put them in a private education, because our education system, I'm surprised he didn't talk about that, stink. Because it's not just that the kids are goofing around, it's that the schools themselves don't hold the kids to standards that would achieve what. I'll tell you a true story. I was dating a woman who became a school counselor. This is before I was married to my wife. And she went through Adventist education for college and master's. So then she's working for a public school system. And like a week to 2 weeks after she's working there, she comes and says, now I know why these kids are messed up. Because the counselors are all messed up. The teachers are all messed up. What would happen in the faculty lounge, the talking, the degrading, the getting, talking about getting high and drunk on the weekends. She was shocked. So if that's what they're doing, right? The standard bearers, what do you think the kids are going to do? So I don't know, my rant.
Yeah, so I think improving the education system, that's got to be important. And then the other thing, and I don't think this was all, like I said, there was a minority of people who were making it about Indians or making it racial, but I don't think that was all of them. There is a legitimate concern in that, yes, we want to have a fair immigration policy that's fair to people who want to come in and be a part of America, right, and assimilate to our culture. But also, policy should take into account native-born citizens as well, right? And so I'm sympathetic to the argument that at certain times and in certain industries, it does benefit us, right? The fact that we can draw, right? Ronald Reagan said it, right? The fact that we can draw the best from all over the world, right? And there is something to that. And at certain times, this is why this process should be a political decision that people can actually debate. And this is where I would say the debate, when it didn't go off the rails, is healthy. Because, listen, if one of my friends brought this up, and I thought it was a good point and something that made me kind of rethink things. But this debate is centered around tech. Well, I don't know if you remember, but like over the last year and a half or whatever, there was one of the big news stories was tech sector layoffs, and it was like thousands of people getting laid off across the tech industry, right?
Hey,
And so
Elon
if
himself
companies
laid off like what 80% of the staff on X.
at Twitter, yeah, that's one social media company, and that was across the industry. There was a lot of tech layoffs, and so if companies are then appealing, to the government to increase their number of H1Bs, well, what are they actually doing then, right? In other words, because what the H1Bs are supposed to be used for these companies is to fill
Gaps.
positions that they can't fill with American, like there's not enough American engineers or whatever. But if they're laying off people and then doing it, well, then what they're trying to do, is
Okay,
undercut these
yeah,
workers.
yeah, that's where I want to bring in what I brought out earlier with my wife. My wife, being a medical doctor, she's a doctor of internal medicine. Uh, we've been married 14 years, so throughout the first 7 years, she worked in hospitals. And many of her colleagues were H1B doctors. And where she would, being an American Caucasian woman, she would, say I'm only going to work 4 days because she didn't work full time except for the first 2 years we were married, or she would stipulate what she wanted, and they would acquiesce to her. But she asked for more money, she got it, or whatever. But these H1B people, whoa, 80-hour work weeks, no breaks, meaning like no vacations. They might get a day off, and they felt compelled because some of these programs are like, if you work 2-3 years under the bone, then you can stay permanently, and you're kind of like a free agent. Then you can start negotiating. But if that's the reason, as you were alluding to, that they want to bring in these H1Bs to undercut the salary they can pay them and not pay American workers, I think a clip of DeSantis had it right. We can't do that. That's not what the program should be for, to get cheap labor and replace American labor. No, it should be to cover the cracks that aren't being filled, but they should be paid accordingly.
And I will say, to both Vivek and Elon's credit, they have acknowledged that the program needs reform or needs to be gutted. And so I think that should be added to the conversation. But like I said, while there is people who, obviously just don't like immigrants or whatever, that's like a fringe. But I saw some news outlets were trying to say, oh, all these people on the right are racist because they're out driving questions about that. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I mean, listen, as we saw with the Trump election, the working class is not all white, right? The working class is Hispanic and black and Asian, right? Like it's a multiracial working class. And yes, like I said, I'm I am somebody who does believe that immigration can be really good for our country. Um, but like I said, it's a political decision, and we shouldn't be making it. I don't know. We shouldn't be making it one of those things where it's just ideologically, we're pro-immigrant or anti-immigrant, but rather we should fit the needs of whatever industry or things so that it benefits our own workers, it benefits companies, yes, but also it's what our society needs. And sometimes that's going to be less immigrants, and really rich CEOs might not always like that because, if you can pay less, right, you're going to try. I mean, of course, but, we just have to make prudential decisions,
I
and
think
we
another
can't.
thing. I think another thing that wasn't. It's timing. A lot of times, it's all about timing. For example, if Vivek would have said this, let's say in June, after seeing Holman eh, do his job and keep his promises and clear up the border and things, and people could see headway being done in that aspect, maybe it's not the powder keg that it was prior to the administration, right? Because look, I could understand what he's getting from. If there's a shortage, why not encourage the best, right? However, I think the timing over the holidays, people are struggling. There is the exhaling after an intense election. Not that it was close, but people didn't know until it actually happened. I think the timing was poor. The administration still hasn't come in, and we haven't seen the promises of Holman clearing up the border and deportations, that perhaps that lit a fuse that didn't need to be lit right now. Because a lot of times it's not what you say, is when you say it.
Mm.
Like a kid does something that you warned them not to do, perhaps not, and it's an honest mistake. Maybe I told you so at that moment is not the right thing to do. And say, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And here's the thing: the Trump administration and then the Republicans, they clearly want all three branches of government, so they're going to have an opportunity to make to make things better. And if they do that, and if natural born citizens or the people already here in America, right, current immigrants and whatever, if everyone currently here is feeling like the upward mobility is back, right, they have breathing room when they go to the grocery store, right, their wallet doesn't feel so light, right, if they actually start fixing things, I think there will be much less opposition to reasonable amounts of legal immigration. But when everything feels like it's falling apart, right? Our infrastructure, everything, people have some legitimate concerns like, hey, you're gonna, because think about it this way. It's like immigration is a process, right? So it's a whole bureaucratic thing about bringing people in and whatever. And so then you want to do that, and then people will turn around and say, wait a minute, but all these other things that you're running, they're all going to pot, right? So why would we trust you to administer, you know,
The
this
H1B,
other
it's,
problem?
yeah. And look, I want to ask you this question because even though I was born here, so I'm legally a United States citizen, my parents are both Hispanic, whereas you, only one of your parents is Hispanic and the other one's Caucasian, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, what is an American? Because I saw somebody ask this on Twitter, and I think it's somebody in our circle of Twitters. Like, and they stated it as an American is anybody who descended on the Mayflower from Europe. And I'm thinking to myself, hold on, wait a minute. That could have been the case back then, but we're so far removed from that. So the question now is, who is an American? Like, what constitutes an American?
Yeah. So, I mean, a citizen of the United States of America would be the shortest answer.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say, right, particularly because if you're born here, you get the privilege of being a citizen, period. And that's the way it should be. I mean,
And stop.
we can have a debate about whether the children of illegal immigrants should, and I think that that's
Yeah. That's
questionable.
that's
But as far
that's
as
a
if your
different
parents are here
episode.
legally and you're born here, you get the privileges of citizenship, right? So that's it's easy to answer it there. But then the Constitution does lay out a naturalization process by which people from elsewhere can become citizens. And so in that case, I think it's important, and I think we need to do a better job at this. Um, of saying, if we're going to bring you in, you need to agree that you like it here, right? You need to agree. Like, if you don't like the way we do things, if you don't like our country, listen, if you come here, should be the bargain. You're going to have the opportunity to reach for the stars, and you're going to be able to be more successful here than anywhere else. But you need to kind of agree. So I was talking to a friend.
Well,
He was
before you diverge into that other thought, I 100% agree there. Look, I am, like I said, I was born in New York City. I am an American citizen. My parents are Hispanic. They both, you know, well, my father became a citizen. He has since deceased. My mom is just has a green card. Um, but to me, an American, obviously, put aside the legal portion of it, right? You're a citizen, all that. To me, an American is someone who buys into the American way. Obviously, God first, right? And I'm not saying I neglect my Hispanic culture, but we have to assimilate, which is gonna sound weird, or maybe I don't know, racist. Forgive me if anybody thinks it's racist. Um, I couldn't marry I personally could not marry a Hispanic woman who is culturally still like, let's say, in Colombia or Venezuela, right? I can marry a Hispanic, but you have to be Americanized. You have to dig the American culture. And personally, for me, I wouldn't, someone who didn't know English, even though I'm Hispanic, right? Somebody who didn't know English, someone who still thinks, quote unquote, Colombia or I'm half Dominican is better or Peru is better. Well, if those two countries are better, then see yourself out. So now I happen to marry a Caucasian woman simply because that's how love works, right? And we connected and stuff like that. But she could have been blonde haired, blue eyed Russian woman who physically looks Caucasian. But if she still has Russian culture above American culture, that's going to be a no go for me. And that's what, to me, is truly an American. Someone who buys into. That doesn't mean, one, you forgo your God or your faith. Two, that doesn't mean you abandon your culture. But you're an American first before anything else. Obviously, God first. But I'm talking about from an earthly perspective. So to me, that's what constitutes being a good American. So if you want to come here to this country, buy into the American spirit, religious liberty, freedom of religion, that you can pick yourself up from your bootstraps and become. Hey, my dad came to this country earning $2.50 washing dishes at Howard Johnson. That's how he started. And he worked there for 2 years. Long story short, at the height of his economic boom, he owned a company that employed 250 people. And he was making way over six figures in the 80s and 90s in this company, right? That's the American dream. And so, I don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah, and before I go into what I was going to say, for anybody who does think that what you're saying about culture is racist or something, I would point to, I believe it was in his book, Dreams from My Father, none other than the
Barack Obama.
former Democratic President Barack Obama once said about some protests that he went to, and it was I forget what it was, some kind of multicultural thing or whatever, but he went to these protests and there was people in American streets, I think it was his city of Chicago, and there was people waving Mexican flags and Brazilian flags and all these other flags in protest, and he had this line which says, I'm gonna get it wrong probably, but it's something to the effect of like, my inner nativist or my inner you know, nationalist or whatever came out seeing this, because it's like, you're in the streets of my city, of my country, and you're waving all these other flags. And I just think that listen, yes,
I
if you have Mexican heritage, you're going to tell your kids, stories from your family and whatever. But at a certain point, if you're more loyal to Mexico, you shouldn't become an American citizen. You should try to make Mexico better and, stay in Mexico. But if you want the opportunities of being here and you want the privileges of citizenship, then you've got to put America over Mexico in your affections and loyalty.
Yes, I agree with that. And once again, it's not that you forget your culture. I love my Peruvian heritage. I love my Dominican heritage. But I've told people in the past, the only country I would fight for is this one. I ain't fighting no, Dominican independence or Peruvian, whatever that was. The only country I would fight for is this one. And obviously, I pray for this country. I pray for my family in Peru and my family in the Dominican Republic. But my loyalties stand here. And I think if everybody had that attitude, then I think the country would be better, right? Give me your huddle masses, you're hungry, you're poor, the whole thing. But it was for what? Not to be a divided United States of America, but a united States of America. And what is America asking of immigrants? It's not to give up their personality, but it's to pull, quote unquote, pull the weight equally in the same direction as a country, which is what? Mainly freedom of religion, freedom of speech, right? The constitutional rights. It doesn't say anything about, you know, people will be treated less. We all need to be uphold those. And yet when you see people like the Barack Obama quote you were talking about, they protest not realizing that this is the only country where that junk is allowed. Try that somewhere else. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They quickly find out how beautiful America is.
I'm reminded of something Andrew Clavin said a while back about this whole black national anthem thing at football games and the Super
Yeah.
Bowl. And he said, wait a minute. So the whole thing is on the police brutality issue. Obviously, we know the numbers that they say they're not true, but there are actual
Yeah.
cases of police brutality. And the thing Andrew Clavin, the point he was making is like, wait a minute. I thought what you're trying to say to me is that as you, as my black brother and sister, my black fellow citizen, are being mistreated and not being granted your rights as an American citizen, right? And like, I should, the only country that claims to really care about all these rights so much, right? So you're saying you're not granted those as my fellow brother and citizen, but then you're also saying that you're part of some other metaphysical country inside of my country. Is
Mm-hmm.
like it's just, why should I care then, right? Like, does that country grant you civil liberties? This,
Mm-hmm.
black America or black nation? Like, no, it's the Constitution of the United States that grants you these liberties. And
Mm-hmm.
so, even when you're protesting, right, when you disrespect the country, right, it's the oxymoronic protest, right? Because in other words, you're asking for equal rights under, what America promises, and yet you're denigrating America or saying you don't want to be a part of it. So it's like, no, like, you got to pick one. Do you want rights as an American citizen, or do you want to sit here and say that America is trash?
I have a
But
friend of mine that I've known since the early 90s. And, we're friends. And, that quote from Jefferson, I've never, what is it about? Never disregarded a friend based on religion or politics or unfriended. Well, anyway, long story short, this guy is, well, let me tell you what kind of person he is. He was praising Luigi.
mm,
You know what I mean? And I told him, but you've become radicalized. You don't even know it. And he's like, yeah, but that CEO has killed more people than Luigi, killing one. And he constantly berates the United States. Mind you, he comes from money. And I tell him all the time, yo, I will buy you a plane ticket, one-way plane ticket to wherever you want to go. And me and another friend have offered. And then we're talking about literally would buy him the plane ticket. They never want to leave, though. All right, they want to talk all that smack, but they never want to leave. And that's what's wrong with protests. It's not that you cannot protest. It's not that, you know, but what's the end goal, right? Are you protesting because you want to fix the issues of America and make it live to its ideals? Or do you want to tear the whole system down and recreate it in your own image? Well, this is the best the world has ever seen as far as representative democracy, a republic where everybody's voice gets heard. And so, yeah, don't get me started.
yeah, no, I think those are good points. Um, One of the things, the stories I started to tell, and I think this goes to the back to the immigration question, and you know, if you can become an American or not, and I think people can. But I have a friend. He was from Germany, and he was here. I don't think it was on an H1B visa. It was a tourism visa, I think. But he was here. He used to come every summer for our camp meeting thing that we have as a church in Michigan, and we just got in conversation about various things. And for anybody who knows me, like right now, my profile picture is me with a 300 blackout. Right, I was shooting with some friends. But I've always liked guns. I always, like going to the range or shooting with friends or skeet shooting or just hanging out. This is totally random, but there's a gun store near me. They literally sell donuts and coffee. So it's like heaven. I love that place. Be looking at guns and then get some donuts and coffee. It's great. Anyway, I was talking to this friend from Germany, and he was talking about how he was thinking about maybe if he wanted to settle in the United States. And then I was telling him about, some of the guns that I had and how I like shooting. And if he's, ever here long enough, he should come back to the farm and we can go shooting sometime or something. And he was like, no, this Americans' gun culture is just so terrible, blah, blah, blah. And the Second Amendment is archaic and this. I'm like, buddy, you shouldn't settle in America. I said, I love you. I hope you keep coming and visiting. But I'm sorry, this is America, right? Like the Second Amendment is right next to the first, right after the First Amendment. The same document, which says that I have the right to worship according to the dictates of my conscience, also guarantees my right to own a firearm. That's America, right? Like, if you don't like it and you're an immigrant, you don't have to
Hey,
come.
I
And
saw I saw a meme, similar story, something similar. A guy. It was a meme made up from Twitter conversations, and somebody's posted, "Oh, I got me a couple of new weapons for Christmas." I'm paraphrasing, and an Australian said, "You Americans in your desire for guns, why do you need all these guns?" And somebody else wrote below it, because it said something like, "Because here in America, you're not in a concentration camp over a COVID that 99% of the people survive." And it's true, right? No way. I for a while I wasn't a big gun advocate. I was neutral. Like, yes, the Second Amendment is there. I'm not going to fight against it. It's there for a reason. But now I'm more pro Second Amendment, because it's true, man. People are nuts. And I like what Colin Noir says: when seconds counts, the police are always minutes away. And we have to be able to defend ourselves. Hey,
yeah.
let me ask you a question. Now that we're talking about immigration, and we got to finish here in 15 minutes. Are you pro adopting Canada as a 51st state or not?
I mean, logistics, we got to work out. I mean,
No, but if you could work out the logistics.
here's what I will answer honestly. I am pro expanding the U.S. reasonably. I don't think the Canada thing is actually. I think Trump was trolling Trudeau, and I think it was
Uh-huh.
funny, and I'm glad he did it. But I don't actually think we're gonna take Canada. Now Greenland, I do think that was a more serious proposal about us buying Greenland. And
Are
I'd be
they up for
totally
sale?
if
No?
Trump can
Okay.
get the deal, right? He calls
I
himself
know.
the art of the deal, right?
No. But look. The only thing that makes Canada, I don't want to say feasible, but that I thought could be done, if is their population is less than California. So it's not like you're bringing in, it wouldn't change. It's not like, quote unquote, you get outvoted, right? Like, a company takeover, you got 10 board members, they bring in 20, and now you're out in the street, right? No, they're less than California, the whole country. And then all the resources, my wife laughs because even though she was born here in the United States, her father is Canadian and her mom was Caucasian. And so she was, the last year she was born, I think, or maybe one more year after her, was the last year you can keep dual citizenship. So she has dual citizenship, United States and Canada. So I joked with her because that would go away, right? If Canada became a state. And I look, Canada, at least Western Canada, is beautiful country,
Yeah, it is.
gorgeous country. And I found out, or skimming. So if this is wrong, you Canadians don't crucify me. But it's like the resources in the West is what keeps the East afloat. Like the taxes from the West is what keeps the East afloat. I would love, only for this standpoint, ready? I would love for something crazy like that to happen and see it in my lifetime. Like us get Greenland or Canada, that would be a trip. I would love it.
Yeah, no, and I think there's something about country like we've kind of got this idea, right, in modernity that everything is fixed. But everything
Yeah.
doesn't have to be fixed. Countries can grow. We've grown before. We added 2 states in the last century, right? We
Yeah.
could add at least one in this century. Um,
and
but
and and for anybody thinking Okay, what happens if somebody comes and takes over the United States? Well, let me plug in that sometime in the first quarter of the new year, I'm going to do a study on Friday nights on the book of Revelation, chapter by chapter. And you're going to see that America is going to be the last superpower before the second coming of Christ. So ain't nobody taking over America. Find out why next quarter.
Um, one other thing on the Canada thing, really what we should have done. So we had a couple of battles in the Revolutionary War that kind of went up that way, but we never had much success. We should have been a little bit more persistent back then, and maybe we could have just gotten Canada back then. Or 'cause I think
Annex it.
Canada had something to do with that with the British when they came down and took out DC. So I guess we kind of owe them. So,
Yeah.
no.
And no,
But
it'd be fun. Like I said, look, they don't have the population. They're less than California. They'll carry their weight in resources. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
then they get benefits too. I like what
like
Trump said.
freedom.
Your yeah, your taxes will drop dramatically. You get the Second Amendment because they basically have confiscated all guns in Canada. You get your Second Amendment right, freedom of speech, and yeah, I think it'd be benefit. All right, one other thing before we show the video. So we spoke about Canada. We spoke about this H. Okay, how would you fix the powder keg that Elon and Big Swami, if you were the president, what would you do?
Well, I mean, I guess I would just say I wouldn't make it so. I would try not to make the debate so if you take this side, you're bad, right?
Yeah.
If you question H1Bs or these companies' practices of how many they're asking for, whatever, you're just a racist who doesn't like immigrants. I would take that off the table because it's obviously
Mm-hmm.
not true. And then I would also take the other side that says, no, we're just not going to let anybody in and blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, I'd say, listen, both these arguments or both these things, we need to take that from the conversation. Nobody's actually saying that. Nobody, like the bulk of the people that have questions, they're not racist. They just want a sane policy. Right? And I think that would help kind of take the temperature down. But then after that, I would say it was like, listen, we have to and I would go further. It's like, why are we talking about that, right? We talk about Christian issues. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, as Christians who are citizens, we want our society to do well. We want it to thrive.
And to
And
be
so,
fair
yeah,
to
we've
everybody.
got to be fair. Both, yes, there are people who flee to this country for opportunities that they don't have elsewhere, and that is part of our strength. But also, we have native citizens, native born citizens, who the government has an obligation to as well, right? And they have an obligation to them really first because
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like
Well, there are
you,
privileges to citizenship.
you're a dad, right? Like you have a household, right? I'm sure if there was some time where you could help someone else, you would, but you're not going to do that at the expense of your
Mm-hmm.
daughters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're your first responsibility. And so, yes, we can have an immigration policy. Yes, if we can steal some of the best and brightest minds from some other countries, right, and it can help America be better, that can be good. But we can't do it at the expense of native born workers and citizens.
Yeah, if I was, in charge of this thing, I think I would work on the H1B and make sure they're not undercutting, like, basically professional slave labor. Can't do that because like I said, I've seen it, to my wife living it, seeing hospitals abuse these people, making them work extra long, undercutting their pay, and raising their pay if they give them another year. You know what I mean? So, and then people
Hey,
are what?
this is just a question you might know the answer to because of your experience.
Hmm.
Do they get paid overtime or do they get paid the same rate for the whole 80 hours? Whereas,
That I don't know. I don't know. I could
because
ask my
that is
wife,
one of
but
those things too. If companies can get away with paying substantially less for the same work, then that's unfair, right? And that
Yeah,
shouldn't
yeah.
be. That's unfair to
No,
both the
no,
immigrants
but
and the
whether
community.
whether that is specific about the overtime, it's they still overwork them. So I don't know what it is, and I know they get paid less because my wife would always make more, and they would work less, and then she can basically dictate her hours for the most part. So yes, it's an issue. But look, this country, there is not one person you can say is the ideal American. Not at this point. We're a melting pot. That's what it's always been. But what captures the true spirit of American is that upholding of the Constitution and wanting us to thrive. As Reagan would say, the light shining on a hill to the world. That's who an American is. It's not skin color, it's not eye color. It is that desire to uplift the Constitution that all men were endowed by our creator with inalienable rights and the pursuit of, and we're here to pursue the best. And that's what it. All right, so I got 9 minutes. Let's set up this video, and I want to set up this video. Joey sent me a video. Now, some of you may laugh as to who the person is saying this, but regardless, if anyone wants this book, now I can't afford to give out 50 of these, but 20 people. If you want this book, or I can tell you where to get it online, but if you want to talk to me about this book, I recommend this book wholeheartedly. It is based on scripture, but it has history in it. So you can go into the history and verify whether these things are so. I actually did a study from the Bible in the book of Daniel. You can catch it on our YouTube channel. We got 2 chapters to go, chapter 11 and 12. Once again, all verified in history. This book is a must read. I would start in the back chapters first. That's how I was taught to read it, because then it allows the beginning chapters to make sense. But nevertheless, here's a video. Joey, you want to say anything setting it up, or just show it?
Yeah. So we'll set it up, right? So the person, well, maybe we won't say the person, or let it be a surprise. But I would actually, I'll just save my comments. Let's watch the video first. Oh, the sound's not coming through.
Yeah, no, hold on.
Had converted from being okay, Danbury Federal Prison. My cellmate, Tim Hunsberger, had converted from being he would tell you, a convict, into being very religious through his readings. Is it Miss White's books and the Seventh-day Adventists? Now, I haven't studied it. I don't know anything about Seventh-day Adventists, but I tell you one thing: it had a powerful impact on a guy who was a criminal that changed his life and really saved his life. He's a good man. He's one of the best men I ever met in this entire faith. Actually changed his life. So for the folks in Danbury at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they go up every Friday night to the prison and they hold a service with Tim and the crew there. I want to thank you guys very much for reaching out to those prisoners. It means a lot to the convicts.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. Go ahead. What do you want to share?
Yeah, so the video, I was scrolling through Facebook and it came up in my feed. One of my friends had shared it. And I was like, that's not every day. you see that? And one of the things I would say, right, because some of the comments from some of my friends who also really appreciate this book and the biblical truths that are in it was like, oh, it's Steve Bannon, right? And we don't like Steve Bannon, whatever. I'm like, listen, 2 things. I very often disagree with Steve Bannon, but he's a human being too, first of all, and I want everybody to have the truth. And listen, if he's got this book, if God led him to read it and to study the Bible more, I want that, right? I think of, okay, first of all, if you like Steve Bannon, and I'm sure some of our audience probably does, that, then whatever, you'd be happy. But for the people who look at that and see someone who is polarizing and they don't like having, I was like, think about it this way. Nebuchadnezzar, trying to think of others. Oh, the Pharaoh of Egypt, who interacted with Abraham, right, who had knowledge of God and whatever. So it's like there's precedent in the Bible for people who you wouldn't expect, right, getting the truth. So I would just say we should pray that he actually reads the book, that he studies the Bible and the prophecies of Revelation that are talked about in there. And yeah, we should pray for him. We should pray for anyone who's coming onto truth or coming near it in the proximity, because like you said, he hasn't read it. But
If my X handle is there, Geo Marin, and Joey's X handle is there. If you guys want a copy of this, we can get you a copy tonight, electronic version. It's iOS app, and you can read it. We can talk about it if you have any questions. It's a great book, and it will enlighten you in ways that you wouldn't have thought so. Joey, wrap us up.
Yeah, I'll just do a wrap up for the plug of why I think you should read this book and why I think you should be studying in particular Daniel and Revelation. Speaking of Daniel, Friday nights, Gio's got a great series that I think he just did chapter 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's going to be on 11 this week, but you got to catch up the back ones. But the reason why I think you should read this book, the reason why I think you should be focused on Bible prophecy is because at the end of the day, Jesus is coming soon, right? Like if you read the prophecy of Daniel chapter 2, we're in the toenails. Obviously, no one knows the day or the hour, but we can see the signs. And so the way I look at kind of the political situation is Republicans and conservatives were given the task by the American people to try to rearrange the ship, right, of America. And I wish them well in that. I hope that they have success. But ultimately, at some point, whether it's at the end of these 4 years or whether it's 50 years down the road, we don't know exactly the length of time. But at some point, Jesus is going to come. And so we need to be preparing our hearts to meet Christ when he comes. And I feel like sometimes we get so distracted with the day-to-day of politics that we kind of forget that politics, again, is like I said, it's about rearranging the chairs on a ship that is going to go down at some point. And so, listen, we want to make sure that the chairs are arranged well and that things are orderly and that we have a good life, right, in the meantime. So we want good politics. But at the end of the day, the controversy is about, this is what Daniel and Revelation are about, it's about being ready for Christ's soon coming, because that's got to be the goal.
Yep. And, I want to do an episode on that real quick as I wrap up in these 3 minutes. The reason I need to wrap up shortly is I got a date night with my 3 daughters. And that fathers have to keep their promises to their kids. And so I told them by 7, I'll be there. But in the last 2 minutes, the reason this is important and the reason why we do the Gio and Joey show ultimately, look at Ben Shapiro. And this is not anything negative about him. But when he first started, he looked like a teenage boy. And now you could see he's matured. He's gotten older. The same with Rush Limbaugh, who started politics over the radio. And now he's dead. What's the end game? Are we just going to keep talking politics till we're old and dead? No, the end game is a surrendered life to Jesus Christ. Because whether you die today or die a ripe old age, if you have Jesus, you have everything. So it's not just about talking politics left and right. It's about getting into a faith-saving relationship with Jesus Christ. And this book, The Great Controversy, is a good historical insight that will lead you to the Bible. And the Bible is the only book you need. But we read history books. And this book is a great history book with a religious twist that will open your eyes to a lot of the things that are happening. That being said, look into my series on the book of Daniel. Early in the next quarter, I'll be doing the book of Revelation. And if you have any questions, ask Joey, ask myself. We're here to help people and to lead them to Jesus Christ ultimately. Until next time on the Gio and Joey Show, be blessed.